Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Dana Lauer from Project ARC. Many of you probably already know me from my work in pushing back on project-based learning into more of an authentic space so that learners have the opportunity to really affect change in their world. In fact, the ARC in Project ARC stands for authenticity, relevancy, and community connected learning. So for the past 20 years plus, this work has really been my passion. And I would say that that journey has been absolutely rewarding, yet bumpy at times. So 3 weeks ago, I put out a call on LinkedIn to connect with me if you considered yourself to be a disagreeable person in the education space. I really didn't know where it was going to go at that point. But the post itself was prompted by a quote from Adam Grant's New York Times bestseller, Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. And so I'm going to read the quote to you specifically in the post that I put out because I don't want to mess that part up. But the piece from Adam Grant said, the ideal members of a challenge network are disagreeable because they're fearless about questioning the way things have always been done and holding us accountable for thinking again. There's evidence that disagreeable people speak up more frequently, especially when leaders aren't receptive, and foster more task conflict. They give the critical feedback we might not want to hear, but need to hear. So I put that call out on LinkedIn. If this quote speaks to you, if you find yourself to be a disagreeable person in the education space, connect with me. I wasn't exactly sure where it was going to go. And after some conversation Tim and I had, we said, hey, we can't have everybody that responded disagree all at once, but we want to start to get these people in the room together, at least virtually. And so DIST was born. So our guests today on our podcast and really in future podcasts disagree, hopefully with us on some pieces, disagree with education, and don't necessarily constitute some kind of an endorsement from Project ARC. We instead, Tim and I both want to learn and grow as we think again, and we honestly have no idea what our guests are going to say as our conversation unfolds over the next 35 minutes or so. But I'm super interested in what they're dissed about in education, and we're going to learn more about that as Tim prompts what those dissed pieces are.
Sure. And as Dana mentioned, I'm Tim Kubik, also with Project ARC. I resonated with what Dana said because I remembered a conversation I had with an old college friend of mine who is general counsel of one of the biggest consulting firms in the world. And I asked him one day, how many people like me do you want in your consulting firm? Right? Is it like 10%, 1%? And he responded immediately, oh, way less than 1%, right? We use them like spices in a recipe. If you put too much in, if you have too many what he called the less than 1%ers, then nothing really gets done. And you need to spread those less than 1%ers around. And I'm going to use my dis word, which is disbelief. I couldn't believe it. Because I've worked for years to try to lead a revolution in every education where everyone is a designer, everyone is community connected. And my good friend just sort of said, nope, I don't want more than less than 1% of you in my organization. And I think other organizations are the same way. So with that, I'm going to go to our three guests and let them start the conversation. I'm going to go with Tengku Hafiz first, who's coming from Malaysia and has woken up this morning to join us. Tengku, I want to ask you, what is your dis word? And then introduce yourself around that idea. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. I've been spending my past 10 years, more than 10 years, 12 years, I would say, working closely with education groups, communities, like lecturers, educators, students. The most thing that I find, I think I'm more disappointed disappointed in the way how the misguided legacy of static classrooms, traditional. I'm not trying to talk about furniture, which is where I come from in my industry. We are a manufacturer of office furniture, education furniture, even healthcare. But the things that I see is beyond the furniture, beyond the forms, the spaces itself. It's how people embrace the changes, especially when we talk about COVID after pandemic. We thought we'll be hybrid. We have more hybrid classroom. We have more online classroom. But again, I think during our first introduction this morning, we talk about how we kind of reset back. Instead of progressing forward, we are kind of back before COVID, where we are still in the same grid system. We are still in the static classroom, rigid rows of desks, whiteboards, chalkboards, teacher-centered approach. The pandemic is supposed to wake us up, like there are more than classroom when we want to learn. There are more than just sitting and facing the teacher in front. So I would give my professional disappointment. I would say my disagreement in this scenario is, despite decades of research on student engagement, and which I'm also involved with the University of Melbourne, Australia, on teacher change and student experience. It's a research, 4+4 years research with the University of Melbourne and my previous company, Steelcase. Many schools still use these outdated layouts. They're still sitting in grids, in rigid settings. And this failed to nurture collaboration. This failed to create more engagement that we thought we will have more, and we're supposed to have after COVID. Because even my own experience with my kids and the local scene here in Malaysia, especially during pandemic, those students that I would say were lost in those time frame, after we came back and start to engage everyone, we start to see everyone again. There's everyone noticed there's something missing. Student engagement, student performance, even some teacher development still lacking. People kind of like trying to go hybrid, but still want to go back to what they've been comfort with. This become, I think, generally a real world problem. But the tough challenge here is the cultural, the infra around these spaces still persist. We need to break away from this comfort zone. And this requires more than willpower. This requires more than just, I want to do it, but how to do it. There is lacking of people helping on this, on how parts. Everyone knows what we need to do, why we need to do, but the how is missing, I think. And it's very disappointing to see this.
All right. We've got disappointment. Chris, how about you? What's your dis word? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My background has been in K-12 education. I've been in online learning for a number of years, working with students and typically at the high school level, also the middle school level. I've been an adjunct professor in educational leadership and things of that nature. The first thing that comes to mind to me would be disengaged. So students are seemingly more disengaged than I've ever seen in my life. Being in and around the classroom, talking to others, having that time remotely, I think with COVID and being able to do things more personally and on their own time, and then going back into the classroom and saying, hey, you can't use your cell phone, or no, you're going to use your cell phone, or some iteration of that. The lack of interest that students have in learning is probably at an all-time high. There's a lack of relevance in what they're doing, I think, in most cases within the classroom setting. And I've seen students just going back into sort of doing packet work or seat work. There's not a dynamic environment going on. Where's the innovation? Where's the gamification? Where's the hybrid learning? Where's the AI tool integration? It's about the same. And that disengagement, I think, also when I talk about students, is also applicable to to teachers and staff. So they were burned out from COVID, still burned out afterward. We're seeing teacher shortages. We're seeing, particularly special education, school counselors, school psychologists. So a lot of profound concerns, I think, with the theme of disengagement. And some of it too is aligned with mental health concerns as well, which is really reaching higher and higher levels. So I think those are sort of all intertwined, and it's disturbing too. So
Okay. All right, thanks, Chris. Now we'll go to Dave Ross, our last panelist. Dave, introduce yourself and what's your dis word?
Sure. Dave Ross. I currently work writing and consulting, usually with AI companies, about the integration of generative AI into the classroom space. And as you can imagine, disruption is the word that I would choose. This will be my third go round with this. So if I get this wrong, I'm out of here. The first round was about 25 years ago. I was consulting with some large corporations about the arrival of the internet in every student's hand. And I really thought that that was going to disrupt the traditional model of instruction. And it was quickly subsumed to serve the needs of traditional instruction. So I was disappointed by that, round one. Round two was COVID. I thought this was the great shock to the system, and it would force a change in pedagogical practices. And we've quickly reverted back to the mean, and it didn't serve as the disruptor that I thought it would be. So the third one is the arrival of ChatGPT, generative AI, which was almost exactly 2 years ago to the day. And I think this will be the disruptor that I've always looked for a variety of reasons. One is the role of the teacher is going to have to change because AI is creating curriculum for us or with us. AI is assessing student work for us or with us. And AI is teaching. There are multiple AI tutors. There are multiple AI course bots. And so if by definition, teachers are no longer creating curriculum, teachers are no longer assessing student work, and teachers are no longer delivering content, what are they doing? So this is going to force a rethink of course structure, pedagogy, and the role of the teacher. My disappointment, and I can't get the word dis in front of fear, I'll call it disfear, or is the fact that I'm worried that this is going to go the way of the arrival of Chromebooks and one-on-one computing and classroom internet, in that the process of learning AI literacy for teachers and students is going to be subsumed and curated and mediated by large corporations. And these fundamental skills that would allow teachers and students to use the AI tools for whatever creative or professional or personal purposes they want to, ethical use, is going to be curated out of existence. And so we're going to lose the power of these tools. But until that happens, I will fight with my last breath to make AI the disruptor to traditional instruction.
Oh, and we certainly hope that the third time is a charm, Dave. It's good to have you three here. I'm going to pass it back to Dana, let her share her dis word. And then it's an open discussion. Whoever wants to chime in after Dana's done, you can either raise your hand or just wave so we can see you. Dana will recognize you and we'll take it from there. Thanks.
So, disturbing, disappointed, disruption, all of them obviously are pieces that resonate with me. But I'm going to go with tonight or this morning, depending on where you are in the world. I'm going to go with really just disbelief. And the reason why that I'm going with disbelief is that even though Tim and I spend a lot of time talking about what we perceive as all the problems of education, sometimes I feel like we're on an island of our own. And I think that my disbelief here is that what I'm realizing as I'm hearing all of you speak is that it's really not just me and it's really not just Tim. There are far more of us out there that want to have the disruptions because we find that students are disengaged, which is quite disturbing and disappointing at the same time. So I'm going to go with disbelief. And just to kind of bring us into this conversation here, as you know, as I was listening at first to Tenku talk about, you know, we know the what and the why, but we're really stuck on the how. And so, Dave, it sounds like you're saying that part of that how is going to maybe come from AI or at least push us in that space. So I'm really interested in hearing what all three of you think in terms of, you know, how is this going to come to fruition so that we do really truly disrupt education this time around?
Well, if I can go first, I want to tag on to what Dana just said. There's a famous saying that refugees vote with their feet, and I think a parallel process is occurring with students in the use of AI. AI is now on the very devices that they have. So even if you give a kid a Chromebook, there are AI-enabled Chromebooks, and search is enabled by AI. So I work with a lot of districts who do a ostrich-like behavior towards AI. They pretend it doesn't exist, but their students are turning in work that's been generated by AI constantly, every single day. And teachers are using AI, yet they don't have an AI policy in place or an AI acceptable use policy. So what I think is going to be the root of change now and the ultimate disruption is students and parents are going to use AI to disrupt the system rather than that being a top-down disruption that occurs because administrators or policymakers want the system to change. I think it will change in force because the user will make the system change.
And Chris, being in the online education space, would you see an alignment with Dave's thoughts or you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I would see some alignment, but I would also, not to be super negative, but I would also think that for as much as the innovation that Dave is referencing that I think is relevant, I think it can always be blocked by prior practices. I'm sure some of you know, but what was the estimated time frame for education change to take place in comparison to other industries? I believe it was the slowest, even slower than components of maybe healthcare or something else like that, or government or something. So that's what I'm alarmed with, because I wonder if, you know, all the advantages of AI will just be like, well, it's just another tool that we're not fully embracing, we're not fully providing training on, we're not fully, you know, integrating. And perhaps maybe you're right. Maybe the parents will take it in their own hands and be like, well, I'm just going to create my own version of this. And maybe it bypasses components of higher ed too. It's like, well, I'm just going to use AI for this to be able to allow me to do that and not pay this tuition. So who knows? What I'm seeing right now, which is interesting, is you have a state like Arizona where you're allowing all kinds of, you know, basic vouchers. Essentially, you can take your money to do whatever you want with it. So if more states start adopting that, maybe there's all kinds of AI schools that sprout up and like, hey, I'm going to go there. I'm going to take my money and do that because I'm not satisfied with what I'm seeing. So, but I am concerned that if we would be status quo as far as that happening within a traditional school setting, I think it would be very much suppressed as far as that kind of, you know, growth, expansion, and opportunities for students and learners. It's similar to the Chromebook, like Dave said. I think it's just another tool that's sitting there. So, but in online, I think there's some capabilities, but I'm not seeing it fully embraced just yet as far as AI components. I'm seeing it sort of like, well, we're doing online, and you know, hey, you can use ChatGPT for this, or you have this integrated item here. The one thing I'm thinking is a red flag that came up within the news recently was sort of the AI components with mental health and things of that nature, and how that can be, if not monitored correctly, then that can have dire consequences. So I'm hopeful for AI too, but I do think there's a lot of stumbling blocks along the way within school systems.
So Tenku, since you're coming from a very business perspective and working with much larger corporations, do you see a much faster pace of adoption in terms of innovation in that space? And how does that compare to your experiences working in the world of education?
Okay, I mean, to give a fair opinion here, fair point of view. I work both with public and international schools as well, global universities, which is from the whole Asia Pacific regions, mostly international schools and universities that came from UK, Harvard, that they're opening their franchise across the region here, Asia Pacific. So in my fair opinion is there's a big gap from public school, public universities with compared to international schools. International schools, from my experience, has been adapting and embracing the technologies, not just AI, VR. We're not talking about just the tools, but the whole ecosystem, the whole space ecosystem has changed, has been, I think, past 5 years, 10 years is already up to the speed, but the public sectors are still missing out, are still left behind. The thing is, what I saw is lack of co-creation between teachers and students. Teachers give the direction, they know what they want, but the lack of voices from students contribute to this gap, especially in public schools, because I think it's one-way direction, where compared to private schools, private institutions, we have more autonomy, we have more students agency, they have more controls of what they want to learn and what they want to teach. This culture creates opportunity for AI to be embraced, because they have options, they have a lot of things they can adapt, they can take in for learnings. So talking about how, again, and how to bridge this gap, not just public sectors, but the whole community in education, is to understand how we can do this is by listening to everyone, I think. And what we're doing today, this morning, is listening to everyone as well. So this should send a strong message that when we listen to everyone, we will learn different things. And from different learnings, we will see different perspectives. That's what I've been experiencing so far.
Well, is it okay if I disagree with Tim and Dana? Because I want to agree with Chris. There's one of the institutional factors that I think is going to roadblock my disruptor of AI is teacher preparation programs at the university level. And when I was at the Buck Institute and project-based learning first started to grow in interest, it very much followed a technology adaptation model that was common in the business world. And there were the early adopters, and then you had the rise towards the bell curve, in which there were late adopters and so on. And then it's mainstream now. It's not considered an innovative process. One of the biggest problems we had towards the adoption of project-based learning 20 years ago is the fact that teacher preparation programs at the universities were telling their students, their teacher candidates, that you need to engage students and create student voice and choice and autonomy. And they trained me and everyone else by lecturing to us and giving us textbooks. And so there's this cognitive dissonance around teacher prep programs, until finally the University of Texas launched a program called UTeach, which was so popular in this inquiry-based model that was franchised around the US. So I see a similar disconnect. There was a recent survey of 500 schools of education in the United States, and they were surveyed about their integration of AI and how it's going to change teaching and pedagogy and the role of the teachers. And less than 5% had even paid any attention to it at all. So they were behind the curve again in teacher prep. Today, where Dana and Chris are, the University of Penn just announced that it's going to have the first masters in education AI, data-driven instructional models. And they just announced that program today. So I'm kind of hoping, but ready to be disappointed, that the teacher prep bandwagon, they are for the first time ever going to be early adopters, and they're going to foment that disruption that I think AI will cause.
Yeah, my hope with that is, there's always been the discussion of personalization. If you could get to that level of granularity with AI enabling that personalization, then maybe you can address that disengagement piece. It has to be at such a personalized level, because think of every other instance of what choices, iTunes, Amazon, everything is my own personal choice, what I want to watch, my content. I'm watching reels, I'm looking at these things. If my education is not curated in that fashion, why do I care? Everything else I interact with is curated down to that level. So to Dave's point about that, I think that's a hope for AI to be able to do that to that level of focus. I was working with someone last year on trying to do that within mathematics and the AI component, to really hone in on where someone is and getting to that level of specificity. Because that's what I think it is. That's what I see as a big disconnect with students, because you're presenting, you're talking about a topic, something's happening. It's like, I don't care. It's not directly aligned with my interest. And then to maybe weave in those standards with that using AI, that's the best chance. The other concern too that I have is I'm very alarmed and concerned about the lack of students going to teacher preparation programs.
Mhm.
I don't know, is that going to be solved by AI? Is that going to be solved by more virtual programming? Because if it's a traditional setting, there are shortages everywhere. It is profound. And that seems like it's gotten significantly worse during COVID and then not much better afterwards. So, but hopefully those innovative programs will attract those students like the one you mentioned at Penn and things of that nature. So,
Yeah, and if I can jump in on that, Chris, we've used the word disconnect a couple times, although it wasn't everybody's initial dis word.
mhm.
Um, but I do think that a lot of teachers are disconnecting from the profession, because my sense from the folks that we work with is they want change.
Yes.
It's not the problem that was centered in the 1980s with a nation at risk. Our nation's teachers are not innovative. They're not doing anything. Instead, they feel constrained by a lot of legislation, by a lot of prescription that is coming from above, whether it's at the district level. And that shortage, I think, is, as Dave said, literally refugees voting with their feet and leaving the profession. Um, and I think that has a real potential to have a disruptive value. But my concern, and I'll just throw this out there, is that if we get to a situation where we don't have enough teachers and we plug kids into AI tutors or course bots or whatever, you use the phrase, we're trying to figure out and personalize where the kid is. So much of that design is still based on the
Mhm.
textbook mentality that like kids move through things in a prescribed sequence. And personalization just means figuring out where they are and what remediation they need. And, we learned this in online learning that you can plug a
Mhm.
kid into a computer. And we saw several school districts around the country that did this with their low performing learners and paid study hall monitors to go in there and watch them while they beat their heads against the computer over and over again, trying to do the same lesson over and over again because they couldn't break through, right? And I know AI may offer some opportunities to do
Right.
that, but if that's how we use it, then we are going to create greater disengagement, right?
I would think that's possible, but if it's really specific to then, um, helping them form a pathway of understanding, along with the human integration, because I just don't see how we would totally lose that,
Mhm.
whether it's a type of coaching or support or, teaching in that, lack of a better word, flipped classroom or some other alternate type of environment. Yeah, we have to still have that connection. But um, from what I've seen and just from talking to educators teaching now after COVID, it's a lot of forcing, a lot of trying to force students to complete work. So
Mhm.
take that for whatever it's worth. That's a really common theme. Um, so yeah, no, I agree with you. It shouldn't just be, oh, we're personalizing and we have to meet this standard and it's do remediation, everything. I mean it from the perspective of really taking them where they would want to go, almost like a choose your own adventure. If you remember those book series, and you're really looking at something that's fascinating and leveling up to something that's excellent. That's the ideal perhaps within AI enabled,
Mm-hmm.
to captivate that interest.
Yeah.
So
One
So
of the things I'm going to use a dis word that Tim said something that disturbs me about the potential problems related to this, and this relates as well to government. So I first moved to Washington during the Obama administration, and I continued to work through the Trump administration. And to say that there was a different environment around education is grotesque understatement. But one of the things that I fear about funding cuts, pending potential funding cuts, and Tim and Dana and I all know this from direct personal experience working in rural schools,
Mm-hmm.
is one of the funding issues related to rural schools is the offering of AP level courses. And because you don't have enough bodies, especially those with domain knowledge, to teach AP in rural schools, is it's been outsourced to online large corporations who provide that. My fear with dropping numbers of teachers and teachers leaving the field so quickly in the arrival of course bots and author bots and AI tutors is that districts are going to look at their funding and say, I really can meet my reduced funding levels by turning to a completely AI enabled classroom. And there are now AI powered textbooks. I read a piece about a month ago about the digital textbook initiative that's going to start nationwide in Korea in April. So we've almost got to the point where AI is going to permeate every aspect of the teaching profession. And I'm disturbed by the potential that there are going to be cost decisions and teachers are going to be eliminated because of this.
Penku, would you say that maybe you see similar trends in your part of the world, in Southeast Asia, or any of the work that you're doing in Australia, or would you see any kind of differences than what we're experiencing here in the States?
I that's a really interesting perspective there, but for so far I've not seen anything like that. But I believe it exists, but probably not that dominant for now. Because still there is a lack of AI integration in education here. Students are more faster than the educators. They explore faster.
Mm-hmm.
Again, back to the textbooks. There is no need for textbooks anymore. They just know within the few clicks they got all informations. But how we control those information, I think is a never-ending debate. Students get information from a lot of sources, different AIs, different websites, different things. How we control that again, I would like to requote your disbelief, Dana. That's it comes to my disbelief that how people think AI is just like, or you open your phone, your laptop and everything, you just click and you get what you want without filtering, without understanding the essential of getting information, what's the essence of the information,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's my disbelief as well. It's a bit kind of worrying to see that scenes here. I mean, I probably in the global scene as well. I don't know.
Yeah. So Dave, would you say that maybe the disconnect that exists and the multiple iterations that you've been through over the years, is there the potential for AI as the disruption to make that connection that those of us in the space have always tried to push toward innovation, whether you call it project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, or authentic projects? Is there that potential, or do you see in the work that you're doing, much to Chris's point, some of that slippage back to more of that just the traditional components, and we're able to produce worksheets faster, or we're able to at the click of a button produce a quiz that our students could take?
I actually had that experience yesterday. So I did a workshop for a district in near Silicon Valley yesterday, and I call it AI for humans, and it's sort of an intro to people who may or may not understand. They've all heard of AI, but have they actually used it effectively and efficiently and ethically? No. So I did that yesterday, and the number one reaction, as soon as I introduced the tools and showed them some of the prompt engineering processes, was I'm going to create worksheets and I'm going to create quizzes. And these quizzes were true, false, or multiple choice. And of course, as an inquiry guy, I react in horror to it. So to me, that speaks to the point that two things. One is I think we need AI literacy training for teachers. Common Sense Media just announced an online course, and it's very much a beginning course that was announced today in partnership with OpenAI, but it's at least a step in the different a step in that direction. And I've been pushing for months, if almost a year now, that we need to revise teacher standards. California has the California standards for the teaching profession. I think that they need to be revised for that point. But the counter argument is this: is so I'll be in China for 2 weeks in a couple of days, and the Chinese are asking me what Chinese teachers are using AI for in their schools because nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
And if you search online for best practices for AI integration in the US, nobody knows. It's so new. So everybody's throwing stuff at the wall to see if it sticks. The United States is both hampered and buoyed by the fact that by law, nobody under the age of 13 in a school can use AI in a classroom, and 13 to 18 is controlled by parent or guardian permission, and in some cases, online training that goes through Google or something. So we really don't even know how to use it. So my hope is the chaos is going to persist long enough that it will disrupt the system.
If I can
And how many of those teachers don't even know
something,
what
Dana,
Verify and
that
Copilot is?
oh, can I jump in, Dana? I don't know. My internet has been a little unstable because I live out in rural Colorado, but so I empathize with what Dave said about rural schools, but I wanted to pick up on two things that surfaced in the conversation with Tenku and Chris. Tenku spent some time talking about agency, and Chris, you used a phrase, I didn't get it exactly right, but informing a pathway of understanding, right? And I wonder, as we're thinking about the things that we're dissatisfied with, if what the real issue here is not the way in which teaching and learning are still seen as a gatekeeper experience. The teacher holds the knowledge. The students must demonstrate that they can be allowed to go through the gate where the teacher decides what is right and what is wrong. And I really like that phrase, Chris. So I'm going to sort of push it back to you about trying to use AI or trying to use different approaches to teaching that allow the students to become informed of their own pathway to understanding. I'm not going to say that every kid is going to figure it out on their own, but there is a possible world which is much more student-centered, has much more agency for kids, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, if we really challenge the gatekeeper notion of teachers in the educational system.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I was as you were talking, I was thinking back to my time as an English teacher, and oftentimes I would purposely create exercises that were ambiguous, so there wasn't a correct answer. And I just wanted to see what the analysis was. So what are you coming up with? Here's a broad topic, or you do role audience format or whatever it might be, one of those exercises, and just figure it out. I'm not telling you an answer. I want to see what your thinking is. What are your writing style? And there are so many opportunities with AI, just explore something. If then statements, just go through a whole exercise, create your own paragraph on a topic you want to read about, create a paragraph with errors in it and try to edit it. I mean, there's just endless array of opportunities instead of, hey, do this worksheet, true, false, fill in the blank, from 2001 that you have in a binder that you're rolling out again. So my hope would be that those would be things to explore. And that's where you find what you have an interest in. I mean, even using AI with my son, we were just randomly putting things into, to DALL-E, and we could see what it looks like. Oh, wow, look at this thing. So there's so many things that are exciting that you can still develop critical analysis, writing, reasoning skills where it's open to various topics. There was discussion too, we were saying earlier about, yes, it must follow this standard. You have to do this assessment in this time frame, and it must be this. And that sort of really takes the fun out of learning anything. So it's really as simple as, from my view, especially within English or other areas. Are you analyzing information? Can you think clearly? What's your point? So on and so forth. And hopefully AI can be a springboard for that.
If I may add, I think we all agree that AI is here and it's not going away. The thing that I think still missing from my what I've been observing is the teacher preparation, because for me, like, I'm not sure you guys, but I'm from I think I'm Gen Z. I think I can't really tell. I can't remember. I'm Gen Z, so I've been trained. I've been taught from different textbooks, from different ways of learning. But if I'm a teacher and I'm come to the students, I'm teaching them what I've been taught. So teacher, me myself, I need to be upskilled. I need to be exposed more than the students themselves. I need to catch up to the trends. I need to catch up to the speed, because students are faster. Even my kids, we have these habits now that I ask my kids every week. Used to be every day. They get boring. I let them tell me what's new this week. So instead of learning from everywhere, I let them feed me, and I'm learning new things. So that's how I think I can catch up to their speed, their language, their jargons, So teachers need to be prepared to teach students of what they do not know, Even teachers also, right? So both needs to be balanced. Teachers need to be ready. And I think probably we can flip this. Students become the teacher, sharing more than teacher giving out. So I mean, I think I know I believe there are parts in this world, different schools, different places been doing this, but it has to be normalized. This has to be a new culture instead of small people, small groups doing this.
So I think that that's really a kind of a good place to start to wrap things up, that we're not necessarily so dissimilar. And as we kind of move into the top of the hour here, I would just like to hear some final thoughts from each of you, 20 to 30 seconds. Maybe if your thinking was prompted by some of the conversation today to change a little bit, or deepened even more so of what you thought walking into this. And if you have any other disses that you want to leave as parting thoughts before we finish up. Let's see. Why don't we go in reverse order? Dave, we'll start with you this time.
I want to change my dis word. I want to use the word dismay now. And I think dismay, as somebody who's been a pain in the educational rear for a very long time, is I'm actually immensely enjoying the dismay that administrators and policymakers and university professors and adults in general are feeling about AI, because they don't understand the world that we live in right now, and it's changing at such a pace it's almost impossible for them to keep up with. And so now they have a lived experience similar to young people, is because they're in a world where there are powers at play that they don't comprehend, they have no control over, and things are moving around them, and they're just like, what the heck is going on? So the adult experience in the education system is mimicking the learner experience in the education system. And that dismay, I think, will have powerful effects. At least I hope so. And I'll keep pushing dismay until it works, or I'll shuffle off to greener pastures.
It's one of the reasons why we've always loved you, Dave. All right, Chris.
Yeah, I just hope for more disruption, more changes for students to be more engaged in learning. Hopefully their AI can help support that. And more disruption with just preparation for students when they leave high school, so they're ready and different options. We're seeing a lot of that right now. So a lot of different colleges are closing and so forth. There's a lot of wild things happening. So hopefully that'll lead to better outcomes for our students and opportunities for them when they're at the post-secondary environment. So
absolutely. All right, Tenku.
I totally agree with Chris and Dave. We need more disruption in this scenario now. Everyone needs to embrace, and everyone, not just kids, not just students, every ages need to understand that we need to embrace this. We cannot be left behind. We cannot put it aside. We cannot put restrictions too much. And I personally hope these voices this morning, I mean tonight, on your time, will be heard, will be posted, and everyone will start. It will be a good thought provoking for everyone.
Well, I must say, I've been very pleased with the disagreeable, personas that came through, because I think that again, as I said when we started this, it's a way for us to learn and grow. And I know that when I personally left the classroom, it was because I told my principal that I was not growing in that role, and he wasn't helping me to grow. And I think that the disagreements will help us all to learn and grow. Whether it's us that have been in this world of education for a long time, or the newbies coming in, or the ones that feel like they've got to act with their feet and walk out the door. But absolutely, let's continue to disagree in many ways so that we can start to make changes. What do you think, Tim?
I'm reminded of the conversations that we had during COVID, which we called displaced, because we thought that COVID was going to displace some of these systems. And I think it has, right? Even though we're all talking about the ways in which there is a reaction going back. I liked what Dave described as a displacement of that gatekeeper function, because now teachers are in the same world of wonder and confusion that their students are as they go from class to class 7 times a day or 8 times a day, depending on their schedule, right? And I'm eager to see what that displacement leads to as more and more teachers hopefully don't leave the profession, but begin to ask questions and arrive at some disagreements with the profession about business as usual. So I also wanted to just say one last dis word to show that they're not all negative. I appreciated the distinct perspectives that we had today from our distinguished guests. So we can keep playing with dis words and remember that they're not all bad. So thank you, everyone.